Last time that was echoing a little bit, but I changed it up.
No, I'm not getting an echo, and we are live.
It would appear that way.
But no, I hear no echo, and yeah, I don't know whose mic that was. I don't know if it was yours, but I'm glad that
I don't know either.
we switched some things up. Hello, everyone, the World Wide Web, Facebook, YouTube, all of the things. Welcome to Compassionate Connections with OCD Gamechangers. We're super excited to have you here. So tonight, I'm terrible at this. I'm supposed to be hosting tonight.
Great job.
Thank you. And I haven't hosted
You're
one of
the
these.
best host.
I've always just been a panel member. So we're going to fumble through with this because there's no rehearsal. I just wrote up a couple questions. But obviously, as always, for those of you who have been tuning in this whole time, we want this to be as interactive as possible. Right. So we will be watching the comments and answering your questions if we can, and kind of just having an open discussion. Our topic this week is OCD, addiction, and dating. And dating.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah,
Dun,
I love how we
dun,
all
dun.
took like a unified deep breath. Like,
It's a tough one. This is a big trigger for a lot of people, me included.
It is.
So
We'll
get into it. Yeah.
yeah.
So first, I guess we should all introduce ourselves. My name is Neil Hemmer. I am a trauma counselor in a small nonprofit in Illinois. I've suffered from OCD since I was 13. I'm a master's social worker and also a recovered alcoholic or recovering. I don't know what the terminology is these days. I actually have never used the term alcoholic. I think it's very stigmatizing. I am someone who struggled with alcohol for a very long time, for about 15 years, and now have about 2 years and 2 months under my belt. So
Congratulations, buddy.
thank you.
Awesome.
And well, I guess we'll just go like this way.
Go this way to me.
Shawn, yeah.
Hey. So I'm Shawn Shinik. I am an artist, a mental health advocate. I developed my own personal project, the Monster Initiative, and Draw Your Monster. And I've worked on various projects here and there, and both the creative and mental health arenas. I have had OCD since I was 10 years old, maybe 10. Didn't get treatment until I was 32. Now in recovery. I escaped and self-medicated with alcohol in my 20s to get away from a lot of discomfort that OCD, and I didn't know it was OCD at the time, but whatever I thought it was, I was getting away from it in my 20s by partying and drinking. So I went pretty hard in my 20s and have recovered from that experience in my 30s and now early 40s. So here I am. So I'm ready to talk everything substance and OCD and dating and everything that comes in between those. So no, it doesn't mirror. It's this way. That was weird.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go over to our dear friend Lauren.
Hi. First of all, you both forgot to include in your resume general badasses. Duh.
Oh yeah, update coming.
Didn't want you to forget. I am Lauren Rosen. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work in California, and I work primarily with people with OCD, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, and co-occurring substance use disorders. And on the other side of things, I also, just since we're naming ages, I was about 7 years old when I started having symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder and didn't get treatment until I was 24, and have been very grateful to be on a recovery journey from that ever since, with, of course, hiccups in the road, as you do. And in addition to that, in 2005, I stopped drinking and using mind-altering substances, although you couldn't tell that based on the way that I talk sometimes. And so, yeah, I love this initiative. I'm so glad we get to talk about this, and especially this topic of dating, because as Shawn said, it's really hard for anyone. But then you add in, a history of addiction and OCD, and it's like, whoa, what are we doing?
It's like I was thinking about it before we got in. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch with the dating things. But it's like almost a threefer. It's like dating in general is just stressful for anybody involved. It's enjoyable, yes, and it's everything amazing, but it's also very stressful and scary. But then you throw in obsessive compulsive disorder, where you're like overthinking things and you're not quite, you know, the uncertainty is you know, causing a lot of issues. And then for someone like me who also relied on substance use, alcohol, to lubricate the old conscious, you know, the my behavior, like I was relying on a few things to safeguard me. So outside of the alcohol and the OCD, once I have gotten better, it's been quite a good, I would say an important challenge to get back out there without some of these things. I didn't mean to go on a tangent because I know we haven't really gone in the first question or anything, but
no, you were great.
But it kind of hits you kind of with the OCD and the addiction element are just two things that I've used to kind of help my anxiety with all this stuff in an unhealthy way, with compulsions alleviating immediate anxiety, and alcohol to help loosen me up. And then that's not healthy anyway, so that doesn't fare well for relationships, for at least it didn't for me. And then in recovery, it kind of has brought in a new set of anxiety, which is understandable because I've been doing things a certain way for so long, but now I'm without kind of these self-made, you know, safety nets that I built for myself. So what now? What do I do now? How do I navigate an already potentially heartbreaking process?
Yeah.
You know, without those. So
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and not only is dating messy, but I feel like what I love about what we're going to do tonight is I feel like all of the dating seminars I've been to at different, you know, mental health related conferences and stuff, right, are pointed. They're like, oh, well, like one thing, right? But I think that this is a multifaceted issue. And, you know, Shawn, you bring up a good point of not only when you're in the middle of addiction and you're in the middle of struggling with your OCD, but yeah, what happens when both of those things go away, right? Like you have built up all of these things for so long to function in a dating world while drinking and while struggling almost debilitatingly with your mental health, right? And then when you get into recovery, I mean, that's what I'm dealing with right now, is that now that I'm in recovery, I'm like, yeah, how do I have fun dating?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does it even look like? What does no pressure dating even look like for someone who lives in a pressure cooker in his mind? Right? Like my mind is constantly like, oh, things have to be, you know, right, like perfect. I'm such a perfectionist, such a black and white thinker, just because of my OCD. And then, yeah, what does fun dating look like, right? And how do normal or neurotypical human adults do this all the time without getting their heart crushed so often? Right?
Yeah. How do
Well,
you
I don't
let
think.
go and sorry, go ahead, Lauren. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't think that they do necessarily. I mean, maybe they do, but I don't know. I have to be. Like my husband is very neurotypical, about as neurotypical as they come, I think. And he and I both will talk about it now. It's like dating is the worst. And my mom used to say to me, like, "Oh, dating's so much fun," and I'd be like, I want to poke my eyes out with pencils when it comes because it's vulnerable.
Yes, totally.
It's super vulnerable. And especially when you're already sort of a vulnerable human, like your skin is very thin. You tend to be sort of a raw nerve in the world, which I think a lot of people who turn to substances and who have OCD are. It's just, it's difficult. And of course there's going to be heartbreak and heartache. So I don't know. I don't know that anyone gets away from the whole dating thing unscathed, but I suppose maybe I'm wrong.
You know, I think we, well, you know, one, Shawn's point of a lot of my friends who are single, which almost none of them are, I'm to the age where it's like, you know, everyone's married and having babies, and, you know, this guy is still on 12 dating apps. But right, like they all describe it as like, oh, it's this like fun, carefree process. But I think also people who take dating seriously, and I think it's the intent of what you're dating for. You know, and maybe the friends who are like, it's the most fun thing in the world, like aren't actually looking for forever, right? And maybe that's why we get those messages so often.
Can I ask, have either of you ever been good at dating casually? Because
No.
that was never a strong suit of mine,
No.
ever.
I have.
Okay.
It's like anything else. It's a practice, and it's got to be something that you communicate pretty well with the other person or people.
Totally.
And when I say casually, I'm not talking about like bar hookups or anything like that. I'm talking about like relationships that I've had that are very out in the open, understood by both people that this is something casual. We're either in a rough period in our life and we miss intimacy, or we're just really, really busy and I'm not ready. I don't have the energy to give a relationship the go that it needs. And that's kind of where I've been in various parts of my life as I've kind of struggled and as someone who's really matured later in life, because I've kind of lost that 20-year decade, whatever my 20s were and early 30s, I had to like also build a career and go to school and get back into my life. And part of that was like really, really busy. So dating or giving my all wasn't a top priority in my life. However, I'm a human, and I miss intimacy. I miss touch. I miss being connected on some level with someone. And so I was able to navigate that again by practice and by learning good communication techniques, that is possible. But you got to be able to like have hard conversations and call it what it is and check your emotions and see where people are at, stuff like that. So, but it's another realm of kind of uncertainty and kind of like weird, but I don't, it's for me, it was less, and this is something I also have to deal with, and we can go in this later. I don't want to be about me or selfish in this conversation, but and if I'm going to be brutally honest, it's also a little bit of a cop out. I was able to do it well in that, I had nice relationships. They're now friends. Like nobody's has gotten hurt. We've had fun times, but I'm kind of avoiding what I really, really want. And that's kind of a person, a dedicated, someone that isn't just sex or isn't just a fun night or whatever here and there. It's kind of like everything that goes in between those times that really builds kind of a connection, stuff like that my OCD still latches on to. I'm really afraid of, it's funny. I kind of joke with myself as I haven't had OCD or relationship OCD because I haven't been in a long-term enough relationship for that to really build. And I'm a little nervous of that. So, so I think it is possible. I think it goes back to what Neil is. It's kind of what you're dating for, what you want, and if you're real about that. So for a while, I was real about being casual, and that was okay with that. I was okay with that. The more that I grow, and the more that I've come around to things in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, things have changed, and they'll change with everybody else with their values. But I think that. Dating can be fun, and it is fun. I think when it's fun, it's fun. When it's working, it's working. But there's a big counter to that.
I was like, when it's
not, it's not. When it sucks, it sucks. So
yeah,
and it's one of the most, I'm getting better with my triggers, but being vulnerable in that sense, that raw with someone who, isn't like a 30-year friendship or a family member that I know is just gonna just love me no matter what, unconditionally. Put yourself out. That's a huge risk, huge act of vulnerability. And when you're, again, to go back, when you have obsessive compulsive disorder and you're second guessing things and you're rigid about being perfect, or you're worried about this and that in your head, it's hard to get in that moment and kind of enjoy the niceness and the loveliness and the touch and the everything of those relationships. And then when you add the substance onto it to help with that problem, it kind of gets you into this bind where making it even more stressful or whatever that it already is. So
yeah. So I have a question for both of you. Speaking of like casual versus committed dating, this is a question that I hear over and over and over again, and I think it's just the boilerplate. We got to answer it, which I'm always very excited to answer it. But how do you tell your partner about your mental health diagnosis? And how long do you wait? How do you approach the subject? Right. And I think same goes for, right, how do you tell your partner that you're sober? How do you tell your partner that you used to really struggle with drugs and alcohol? Right? When do you approach that subject? How do you approach that subject? How committed do you have to be? Do you tell it to casual dates? Do you not tell it to casual dates?
It's so tricky, isn't it? Yeah. I think especially, so a couple of things that are specific to the diagnoses. One is that with OCD, a lot of us with OCD have moral scrupulosity, or at least tendencies toward that, and wanting to be more transparent lest we lie about whether or not we, you know what I mean? So the tendency to sort of almost compulsively confess early on in dating, I think, can be heightened for somebody with OCD. But I think maybe more importantly than that, I know that for me, having a constellation of mental health diagnoses, including OCD and SUD, that like I had a lot of noise about informing someone of that. And because of the broken narrative. And that's certainly not part of where I'm at these days. But there have been moments where it's like, gosh, when am I going to tell this person where it's not going to be a reason for them to just be like, I'm out. This is all a little bit too much for me. You know?
Yeah. For me, it's kind of the tale of two Shawns, where for
I
a
love
while,
that. I love that.
In my 20s, I was, and this is before I knew that I had OCD, and I knew that something was wrong, and I had some sort of mental illness. I was depression and other things, and I wouldn't have said anything to anybody early on, like to be that vulnerable, or to give them that kind of easy out to not date me was something that I wasn't prepared to do. And I remember, like, even I don't there was like these like really weird kind of almost cruel dating reality shows on MTV back in the early 2000s, where it was like Dateable or something like that, and like I'm going down these things, and I'm like looking at my red flags and all these things, like, and I'm like, oh my goodness, if I say too much, then it's over. No one's going to accept me. And I've slowly kind of countered that with like looking at it as an easy way for me to strategically filter people out of my life who don't belong or need to be in there. So when I wasn't drinking, so I stopped drinking from 34 to 39. 38, 39. And while I was casually dating during this time, when I met someone on an app, or even just whatever out in society, the first thing I said was like, hey, I'm not drinking. Are you okay with that? Just, hey, I'm not drinking right now. That's the expectation. If you want to go get hammered and go do a dance club, I'll go, but I'm not going to be the person that's going to be doing Jaeger bombs with you. And
Shinnock is killing the communications.
Well, because I had to learn, because I was a bad communicator when I was younger, and I will tell you that most women that I told that to were totally fine with it. They're fine, like, all right, cool, let's hang, whatever. Those who weren't were just like, all right, well, maybe not my scene because I'm doing this and whatever. With the mental health stuff, the OCD, I kind of strategize that a little bit differently. I'm pretty open with it. I mean, you can Google search me and it comes right up, so it's kind of there. it gives me an out in the first place. But when it wasn't so out there, I mean, I would, it's not something that I would lead with. It's not something that like I'm going to dump on their plate on the first night. I'm going to enjoy my first night of dinner. I don't think that I need to get that deep into my own personalness over some appetizers and a dinner with someone I don't even know. Now, once we start to hang out a little bit and get to know each other, and I feel a little bit more comfortable with them, we go into deeper conversations, both on her part and my part. That's where I go, hey, this is what I've been dealing with in my life. And it's also an opportunity to educate them on what it might be. And frankly, you know, it's not something that I'm going to do at 6 months that late. And it's not something I'm going to do on the first date, but in between there, maybe the first few dates after you develop a connection, I'm going to go there because frankly, I'd rather find out now if that's not something they're willing to deal with earlier on than having committed time and emotions and feelings for them to be like, all right, you know, I'm not this, for whatever reason, they decide that they don't want to be a part of my life because of that. And I had that happen to me. I dated a woman in my early 30s, or I can't remember when it was. And I did come out and say, you know, I had OCD, and it was when I was really severely symptomatic as well. It was before I got treatment, and she broke up with me because of that. But I had not had treatment yet. I didn't know what was going on. But I will say that I've had success in sharing my story and people being okay with it. I think people will be surprised with how understanding, or trying to be an understanding person that other people are. It's very scary to be vulnerable like that. It's very scary to like say, sometimes it's scary that you're like, hey, I like the Bears, and then they're going to be like, I like the Browns. And then that's the end of the thing. And imagine saying like, hey, I've got a lifelong diagnosis that affects my life in these ways. So, again, it's something that I don't know if my technique is the way that everybody should go, but it's something that I feel comfortable with. I think you got to figure out what's okay with you. If you feel like, hey, you know, I'm going to get this out in the open now on the first date, I guess that's you. That feels a little bit too much and intrusive on the first date to me. So I wait a little bit to have a nice deep conversation.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
I accidentally told this person the first time we talked that I had violent, intrusive thoughts.
Oh.
And I don't know why, but I like imagined that they had some baseline understanding of like what OCD was. And they were like, like the whole tone changed. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. Not everyone knows what OCD is.
That's another thing you gotta be careful about, is when you start
you
intrusive thoughts in someone, they're like, I'm not in the OCD community right now. I'm in the world,
like the regular world.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I totally dropped the ball. I totally dropped it on them. And I was like, yeah, I have like constant violent thoughts. And they were like, what?
Oh, cool.
You bring up a great point, because I've had to go there, because I've had to like, that's why I've learned to kind of like tiptoe into the shallow end. Like, hey, this is what I have. And then I kind of go into, this is what OCD is all about, really, rather than what you've maybe heard it is. And then I kind of go deep into the deep end with intrusive thoughts, and this is why I have those and why it's good. I'm good. I'm okay.
I'm not actually like violent.
Yeah, I think we specifically have like an upper hand because we have done so much advocacy, so it was easy for me to just be like, you can Google me and like figure out that like I'm not a murderer.
Do you want to know what one of my exposures was in residential that my therapist used to make me do? So he would. So one of my intrusive thoughts, or one of the themes that I dealt with a lot, was that I was this evil person, the sociopath, this like serial killer guy, like the American Psycho guy that is just like no feelings, and I'm just gonna for fun chop people up. So as I do, and so the exposure was he would put like trash bags and like zip ties in the back of my car.
Oh my gosh!
And have me go to meetups and meet new people and talk to women with like chain like ties and trash bags in the back of my car, waiting for me to like kidnap them and Ted Bundy them, basically.
Wow.
I try to explain OCD therapy to people all the time, to like ERP, and they're just like, that doesn't sound.
So
No,
I went on a date with that in my car one time as an exposure. That was rough.
That's awesome though. But I also do think that it's harder when for you guys to maybe say that as opposed to like a female in a heterosexual relationship saying that to a man, like I have violent thoughts. You're not necessarily going to be as nervous, right? Because I think women are already in a position where if you're going on a date and there's a guy and you don't know him, that you're already going to be on pins and needles, and then all of a sudden it's like, I have intrusive violent thoughts. It's like, oh, cool, neat.
You're already checking the exits. You got your mace in your purse, and this dude is telling you that, I've had thoughts of being a sociopath. So, hey, second date. Hey, you want a nightcap?
Yeah. So now I've learned. And I think that, I mean, Shawn, I'm kind of more leaning towards your description. And I think that one thing that you said really struck me, that how understanding people are and which is true, right? And I think that's what people with OCD, or especially myself, are worried about the most, right? Like of rejection. Like, oh, they're going to think I'm a freak. Okay. And they're not going to want to be with me. And I think something that I not only learned along the way of dating is that rejection is part of life, right? And I think we all know that, and it does hurt, right? There's no way around that hurt.
Nope.
It just does, right? But one, not tying it to my worth has been helpful, right? If I doing a lot of inner work on, if someone doesn't like me, we just don't fit, right? It has nothing to do with like my worth as a person, and that was my biggest fear way back when. Right? That, because this one person out of 8 billion turned me down, I'm now not worthy of love, right? Generalizing that one rejection to the rest of the planet, right? Which is just total catastrophizing and totally OCD.
It's the all or nothing black and white thinking that we get ourselves into, where like this one rejection means I'm just undateable.
I'm gonna be alone forever.
I'm unworthy of any kind of love or anything.
And the personalizing, right? This idea that somehow it's an indicator of me that this person doesn't like me, which it really is more about rightness of fit than it is. But I think it is really tricky because, and I know for me, I'd be curious to hear both of your thoughts on this, but when I did, meet my husband and we started dating, I kind of looked back at my dating history and I recognized how much of my life I had been ruled by the uncertainty about whether or not I'd ever find somebody, whether or not I was like worthy of love, all of those things. And so when I'd go on dates, it would be me constantly checking text messages afterward, be like, does he like me? Is he into me? Right. Like while obviously I'm not sure that I was obsessive compulsive about that, I do have those propensities in a lot of areas of my life. And I think that it did show up, and this tendency to be like, how do I annihilate this uncertainty? And of course that has an impact too, in terms of that's not what people really want, like having somebody breathing down their necks and being like, are you going to reject me? Are you going to reject me? Or, that's not usually a turn on for people. So I'm curious
it makes it wrong.
And it takes the fun out of it. Right. And Shawn, but Shawn, you made a good point when you said it's fun when it's fun, and when it's not, it like really sucks. Right.
Yeah.
But that is the trick, is that, and Lauren, I'm going through a similar thing right now, just with my own therapy, and really these past 2 years of being sober has been an exercise in me just by myself is enough, right? And I am worthy of love, and when it happens, it's going to happen, right? But accepting that uncertainty and sitting in that and going on dates and still moving toward, like, living a values-based life, still moving towards, Neil wants to get married, and Neil wants little Neil babies all over. Like, oh my God, they're going to be amazing. They're all going to be insane. It's going to be awesome.
Little Neil babies.
I do too, for sure.
So still moving towards that, that goal, and still moving towards that possible future, but also not getting paralyzed by the, oh my God, if I don't, right, if it doesn't work out with this one person I matched with on this one app, I'm screwed forever. Right. And that's been a really hard thing these past like 2.5 years of trying to struggle with. And also just the obsessive nature of the one finding that one person, you know, like, yeah.
No. Oh, before we move on, I wanted to, first of all, I love everything that you're both saying. Sorry. I like, before I forget where my brain is, the question of when to divulge the information.
Yeah, I
I
want to hear your
agree.
story, Lauren. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say I agree with Shawn, the fact that you said that people often will surprise you in a really positive way because we all have something, right? Everybody's got something. And to them, that it's a big thing, whether or not it's a big thing to you. But I think that vulnerability is earned. And so it's not like you want to just go being vulnerable with every Tom, Dick, and Harry. And I don't mean that even in like a physical intimacy kind of a way, but like I'm not going to just share my deep fears. Although there was a point in my life when I would have done this with friends and with guys I was dating, where it's just like, here's all my stuff, that I learned over time that actually if my sense of worth is going to be bound by how they respond, then I'm not ready to share this with them yet.
Oh, one thing that I just thought of while you were saying, sorry, that was that was a mic drop, dude. No, I think for most of my life, I have valued authenticity to an unhealthy degree where I am just like 100%, right? Like right out there. I have OCD. I'm a drug addict and a drunk. Like I have all this messed up stuff in my past. Are you gonna love me? Right?
Totally.
So, but at the same time, and I forgot that one of my past therapists, I almost said ex-therapist, like an ex-girlfriend. One of my past therapists was like, well, that seems like you're gathering evidence, right? Like that almost seems like compulsive vulnerability, that you are telling everyone all of these things immediately, and you're wondering if they're going to give you the reaction that you're desiring.
Yes. That's what I was saying earlier when I said that thing about just like sort of unloading on people right out of the gate. Same idea, that it's almost like I want to make sure that they care about me as I am. And yes, so much yes to what you just said.
Yeah. And to your point, Lauren, when I first got really, really healthy with treatment and everything like that, what I wanted to do was just sing to the world everything that was going on, because I felt so empowered and so confident for the first time in my life. I was like, I'm gonna tell everybody everything. I'm not gonna give a shit, and they're gonna deal with it. But absolutely, to your point, and I agree with this, Lauren, and I've learned this, that I think that, if you're gonna want some deep personal stuff out of me, we gotta earn it together. We gotta like, there's got to be some effort into there to get into some things, and some personal stuff is going to be helped for someone that I connect with on some level and is willing to respond in a way that I think is helpful and growth oriented. And it kind of also reminds me that I've had to say no to people that aren't like that as well. There's the other side of this, to where how hard is it, especially with my over sense of my scrupulosity issues, being a good guy, to break someone else's heart, to say no to someone. That almost kills me more than it does to get rejected. Not as much, because I'm still handling rejection and stuff like that on many different levels. To what you were saying earlier, Lauren, I never wanted to be kind of the creepy guy that was checking text messages and like, do you still love me and stuff like that. And I've actually avoided, because I didn't want to be that guy. But I can feel it sometimes growing in, because of it's my own insecurities that are really building that up. But
totally,
yeah. So I lost my train of thought of what I was talking about, but there's a point there somewhere.
Well, lots of points there, all over the place, actually.
Yeah.
I'm really
And I will say before we go on, not only do I think it is important just to state for everyone who's watching this and for all of us, I think no one way of dating is valid, right? Like you can do things a different way and you can be brazenly authentic the first date and still have things work out, right? It is whatever is best for you. And I also think that, some of these unhealthy things that I personally did can be done in a healthy way, right? I guess I have to believe that they can, because vulnerability and authenticity is so near and dear to my heart. But yeah, I mean, I think that you need a community behind you to make sure that you're doing those things the right reason and not tying your worth to your past, right? To your baggage. And I think that's what I do a lot of the time, right? Like, oh, look how much better I am now, right? Please love me for who I am now, right? Yada, yada, yada. And speaking of that, I have another good question. Because it ties in perfectly. How do you find your identity again after dealing with both substance use and OCD, right? Like, how do you describe yourself to a potential partner when both of those things are not your core identity anymore? Your baggage is not your identity any longer, right? So how do you sell yourself?
I don't know. I'm wondering too.
This is where why we coming in. Oh, sorry, Lauren. I thought you were done.
Go. No. I was just gonna say, like, why do we need to describe ourselves? Like, maybe saying like I enjoy this or I like this or whatever. But I think it's interesting, this impulse to want to be able to sort of put ourselves in boxes and be like, this is the presentation of who I am, versus just showing up and being, because I don't know. I don't know who I am now, and I'm constantly evolving. I mean, philosophically, if I start to say like, oh, I am this, and as soon as I do that, I'm ruled now by this thing. Like, I'm intelligent, right? Well, that's debatable. But, if I'm glued to that identity, now that identity has me. So if I come across as stupid in a moment, then I'm going to be like, my sense of self is going to be all tied up in that. So I went kind of on a tangent with this in my brain, but I don't know.
I like that you went on a tangent, because I think that, I mean, I guess I can only speak for myself and for people who I went to treatment with, but I think a lot of us tie our identities to our greatest struggles, right? Like, this was me, or I'm really better now, and this is the new me, and all those things. And I think that's a great point, right? That why do we have to package ourselves in any particular way?
It's all just a narrative, right?
Well, I think, Neil, you bring up a really important question, because I think it does.
Totally.
People do think about this. I think whether we should or shouldn't, it comes up. I think because my identity was kind of the drunk fun guy at the bars. That's how people knew me. That's where I got a lot of self-worth, as being some sort of person of utility in these social spaces, as someone who can make people laugh, or kind of a tall, goofy guy, or kind of the laid back Shawn who's just a lot of fun and did karaoke and stuff like that. That's kind of how I built how people saw me, and how I gathered any kind of worth in life when I was feeling life was worthless. So there was sort of an identity there. I think the way that's evolved and changed, and to Lauren's point, is that, I am always open to dating. I'm trying to get back into dating and stuff like that now. But I've thought about the same thing when, like, all these things ask you like who you are, what you're into. They're all kind of the same thing. We all like hiking. We all like music, whatever. And in trying in not over analyzing myself, I've kind of tried to look more into not who I am, but like what drives me, like how have I reconnected with some values in my life, and what are important, like having a deep mutual connection with someone, wanting to be active, that type of thing. They're all kind of have these loose borders where I don't feel as boxed in. If I was like, I'm this thing, like I'll give a, like, I was the biggest Pearl Jam fanboy, and outside of my drinking, everybody knew me as the Pearl Jam guy, and I like put myself in this box of like, no other music is good, only Pearl Jam, everything else sucks, whatever, and it severely limited me. And now, as I've opened up and grown, like I've opened up all these aspects. Like I'm listening to music that people thought were cool in like 2007 that I'm just now like discovering. And it's just a way of being kind of, I think that for an identity, there's got to be some anchors there. There's got to be some values of things that make you tick, but you also want a floating, evolving identity to let in flexibility, let in new things, new ideas, new people. Because if you have this stuck identity or this wall, this cage around you that you think that you are, then you're going to lock people out eventually. So I think I've tried to be more flexible with that idea, as hard as it is, because I did have these rules and boundaries that, like, also looking for an identity in someone else. Like this person has got to be this with this merit and this characteristics. And I think that also takes people out of the game that could be lovely, wonderful people in my life. So I think there's a case again, speaking for me, for both to be able to have some sort of anchor and center for myself as I date, but not be so locked into it where I've painted myself into a corner or locked myself in a box, and it just is not. I've stopped growing as a person.
I love that middle ground. That's it. Like maybe not an identity per se, but like looking at the things that are important to you and keeping those at the forefront without necessarily, being inflexible with like, this is the only thing that matters, or yeah. By the way, Neil, did you just go and transform into a new person? Do you have your identity now?
I did. I was actually putting my sweater away, but
I had to call you out, man.
One of the participants did do Sophia.
I see that. Smooth.
I'm in rolly chair.
So I did notice that we have a question. If I can read it and maybe pose it to you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Michael asks, have you ever been so scared of rejection and dating you just avoid dating altogether? Unfortunately, that is where I'm at with dating.
The answer is yes.
The answer is 100% yes.
Yeah.
The answer is absolute avoidance is one of my biggest. If there's any kind of diagnosable OCD left in me, it's definitely avoidance of that type of stuff. And that's something that I have to battle because I want to be with someone and I want to have that connection. So it's something that is very hard, but I understand and I empathize with that tremendously. There's been years where I didn't date and put myself out there for that very reason, because I couldn't handle rejection on any level. So that's tough. I can kind of share what's worked for me, and that's kind of it's kind of the theme that we've been talking about, is maybe in small doses taking small little steps towards risk and some vulnerability in there. I think the way out of this is to do the thing, to not avoid
and ERP.
Put yourself out there, to do some real life in vivo ERP. It's very tough. It's very hard. I know where you're coming from, Michael. I feel you. There's a way out of that.
Yeah. Michael, I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable and so authentic, right? Like that is where you're at right now. And not only is that okay, but I think everyone goes, OCD, addiction, neurotypical, every human on earth goes through periods of their life where they're just like, we're more tender at points, right? And sometimes rejection really is too hard to handle, right? And anybody who says otherwise
Great
doesn't
point.
know what they're talking about. Because really, I mean, if we are at a point where we don't have a strong foundation in ourselves, and maybe we don't have great social supports or whatever, or we have numerous traumatic experiences while dating, right? And that rejection feels world ending. And of course, who wouldn't run away from the end of the world? That like, if you want to survive and you want to feel stable, of course you run away from it. I think that's just a natural human inclination. But Shawn's right, is that avoidance is like also one of my biggest OCD things, where I'm just like, I'm just not going to do that, and like no one's forcing me to, right? So like so I don't have to. What's worked for me is seeing it as an exercise in stretching myself, right? Not putting away, right, and kind of maybe compartmentalizing the rejection piece in my mind to not be so poignant as to, this is about you, this is about your worth, you suck. More about, I'm learning, and I'm learning what I like about myself, and I'm learning what I like about other people, and I'm going and doing, right? One thing for me, and the thing that I've been doing while I have been casually dating recently, is just doing fun things, right? I've been stuck in my house for 2 years, and I've been totally isolating and not talking to anyone for like 2 years of my life. So I'm just going and doing fun things with people that I have a good connection with, right? And so it's not only an exercise in stretching myself and stretching that rejection distress tolerance, but it's also an exercise in stretching my anxiety. It's an exercise in stretching my social prowess now that I'm sober, right? All those kind of things that it took a lot of the pressure off me. I reframed it in my mind. I was like, it's not about the rejection. It's not about finding a life partner. It's just about getting out there, finding people that I think are attractive and interesting, and that I want to get to know, and stretching myself in that way. I think we get stuck in this, once again, it's black and white thinking of not only rejection, but if we get rejected, what does that mean about me? I'm going to be alone forever. I'm ugly. I'm not intelligent, all those things. So reframing it as and sometimes I even treat myself like a kid. And this is probably something that I don't talk about often. But I treat kids for a living. And I only work with like real little ones, right? So when I'm teaching them about distress tolerance or emotions or something, when I'm scared or don't want to do something, I treat myself like a kid. I go, okay, we're going to try this, right? And if it doesn't work, that's okay, Neil. I talk to myself like a kid in my head, and I talk to myself with the kindness that I give my kids when we're talking about really hard stuff. And that has really been valuable for me.
I love that.
Good points.
Yeah. I want to say on the sort of opposite. So, Michael, first of all, thank you for your vulnerability. For vulnerability, I can't even speak. But I'm sure, like as Neil said, that like everyone else on the planet, it's quite typical at points to avoid dating because rejection is hard, vulnerability is hard. So you are certainly not alone. I know for me, I was so scared that I would never find somebody that there were occasions where I would like take a break because I needed to work on myself because somebody told me that. So I was like, I'm not dating right now because I'm working on myself. So my issue was like to like almost do that as a control strategy. Like I'm gonna back off because that's how I'm gonna find the person. Which I think I just wanted to highlight that because I think that there are likely other people like me who are like, okay, well, in a way, we're viewing it as obsessive and compulsive. It's like a compulsion. Like I'm gonna stop dating, but not to avoid, but so that I can make sure that it happens. Which sounds really weird now that I say it, but that's brains for you. And I was going to say something else, but I think that that fear of rejection is so scary. And to Neil's point as well, that how much how much weight you put on every single interaction is it's an important thing to look at. And I know that for me, that was where the whole thing changed, was when I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit and sort of even daydream ad nauseum about this person when we're not together, because I don't know them. And I don't want them taking up that much of my time. I got a very full life. I want to live my life. And then when I'm with them, I'll get to know them. I'll see if I like them, if they like me. But every time that I want to check my phone to see whether or not they've texted, or, I want to sort of check to take their emotional temperature on a date, I'm just going to, like Shawn also was talking about, right? Like, I'm going to do the response prevention. I'm going to back off and say, I don't know. I don't know what this person thinks about me. That's really uncomfortable. And okay, let's see how this all turns out. And even down to what you were saying, Neil, about like talking to yourself as a child, right? Like, yeah, this is really scary, and we're going to do it. We're going to see how this all turns out. Cause I don't know. That's been the best approach to life I've found, is like, all right, well, this is an interesting science experiment. Let's see how this one goes. And you see.
Well, and even if I think, yeah. And the thing that plays through my head now that I'm in a better place with my OCD, and obviously, right, all of these are dependent on us being at least a little bit mentally well. Obviously, I think a lot of these things might be challenging when we're like debilitatingly sick. But yeah, one of the things that helps me is, even if things do turn out bad, right, I learned a cool lesson. And that's what I always tell my kids too. Like, even if you don't like this activity we do, even if even if we get really scared together, that's okay. We can get scared together. Emotions are normal, and they come on a spectrum, and they don't last forever.
Well said.
Sorry. Go ahead, Neil.
Well, I was going to say, and I'll
We're going to wrap up.
And I'll let you go first. We have about 5 minutes left. Are there any final wrap up thoughts? And Shawn, you have some right off the gate.
Well, I didn't know if there were any more questions from the comment section.
I don't see any, but if there are, please, ask them. And
I think, wow, this went so well. We might have to have a part 2 of this.
Yeah.
So if there are more questions and things, and we miss something, we'll be sure to get it next time.
Definitely.
The thing I was going to ask both of you is there a time when you're ready? Like, is there a perfect time to start dating? So I've been in both places. I've been in a time where I'm in a rough spot. I shouldn't be dating. That's probably an objective. Like, hey, I need to focus on this. Dating is probably not an option. And there's been times where I've kind of used that as an avoidance excuse to be like, well, I'm scared of dating. So, and what I tend to do with my perfectionism, and this happens with my artwork and everything, is that things have to feel, it's got to be the right time. Like the right time to go, it's got to be the perfect time to go to therapy, or the perfect time to go whatever. When someone's coming out of the darkness, is there ever a good time to start dating? Like, is there a threshold where, like, or is it just kind of jumping back in, kind of just testing the waters and being able to respond to it differently?
Can I go first?
Neil Hammer has a thought.
Short answer is no.
Yeah.
But the long answer is yes. So I'm going to be as confusing as possible about this. No, so deep in my soul, I truly don't believe that there is a right time. Just like, something that Michael actually said in response to all our questions is like, I have trust issues, right? Example, is this person a good person? Right? Or is this the right person? Right? Is a question I often ask myself, right? Is this the right time, or right? Yep. Like, I think with the way that my brain works, there is an endless stream of, is this right? Right. Yeah. And the answer is never yes. Right. And because that's just my OCD. The answer, it's always going to be the wrong time. It's always going to be the wrong place. It's always going to be the wrong person. It's always going to be the wrong situation. Yep. I'm always going to be too busy. Right. All those kind of things. So Yes and no.
Yeah.
No, there is not logically, and I know that, right? And I think that you could even start dating in the middle of your sickest, right? You might not be at your best, but when are we ever at our best, right? What even is our best? Are we saying that when I'm sick with my OCD, when I have another episode, I'm lesser than? No, right? Like that would be a horrible thing to say to someone. And I can't believe that about myself, right? Are there better times than others to start dating depending on factors? Sure, right? Depending on your life factors, right? And I think it also takes a level of commitment, right? Depends what kind of commitment you want, depends what kind of dating you want, all those kind of things. But no, there is no perfect right time to date ever.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't think it's like with anything else, we're trying to find, I think there's a propensity to try to find the equation where it's like, if we put in this variable and this variable, then we get the thing. Like that's how we get the right partner and the reality is that's not, we just show up and then there are variables and then things sort of unfold. And then we decide, oh, this is something I want to explore more, or no, this is not something I want to explore more. And that can happen when you're really in the throes of it or not. And I would say too, that this person for people who are polyamorous, like these people, right, who you're going to find are the people with whom you are going to ultimately, if you're looking for a long-term dating prospect and potentially for something serious, these are the people who you're going to be most vulnerable with over time. And so while it's probably not in the initial stages of dating that, like we've talked about earlier, that you want to sort of share all of these pieces of yourself, that at some point your whole like image that you're presenting to the person you're dating is going to unravel, and that's okay. It's actually Dan Savage has a great piece on. Do you guys know who this is?
Is that the Love podcast?
Do you know? I don't know. He might have a love podcast. Yeah. He has a video on YouTube that's called The Price of Admission. And it's talking about how settling is unavoidable in relationship, and that actually in a good, healthy relationship, that you're both sort of doing each other the favor of pretending you are who the other person thinks you are. Or who you are. The other person perceives you as the person who you began as in the dating experience, right? They do you the favor of seeing the sort of best in you, which pushes you to sort of live up to that. I brought that up for some reason, but for the life of me, I couldn't tell you why now.
But the truth of the matter is they're going to see all sides of you. They're going to see the bad, and it's how you navigate all the things, the best, and they're going to see the most vulnerable and ugly and everything. And
totally. And you want somebody who's going to show up for you in that, and who's also, maybe this is the part that I was going to tie in, going to do you the favor of seeing the best in you while they hold the most challenging pieces with you.
Oh, well said. Great.
That
very nice.
That's a note to end on.
That's a good.
Wow.
That was a mic drop.
Wow. Thanks.
Hail and low. That's you gotta. I don't know how you disconnect that thing and drop it, Lauren. But,
I'm not going to. It's expensive.
I've looked that one up. I'm not buying that mic. I know it.
It was a gift.
Pleasure to talk with everyone tonight. That was a great conversation. We should do it. There should be another one.
It's an important topic for sure.
So guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Everyone who commented and is watching and will watch, we really appreciate you being so dedicated to watching these and kind of joining us on this journey, because Compassionate Connections is just holds a really special place in all of our hearts. And we hope that you get something out of it tonight. And we'll be back the first Monday of next month Every Monday, not every Monday, every first Monday of the month, we will be here with a different topic. But this seemed so good, and we have so much left to say that we might do a part two.
Maybe we just roll on to that, and then because we got other stuff lined up. But by the way, just as a ending note, Sylvia asked if we're going to the conference. Neil will not be joining us at the Denver conference, but Shawn and I will both be there. So yeah, so that's exciting. We'll miss Neil.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, have a great night. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye.